cloud. Perfect. So, well, welcome. So good evening and welcome to Roundabout Books event for the Last Housewife with Ashley Winstead. My name is Julie. I'm the events manager here at the store. So this is a special hybrid event on Zoom and streaming in the store. I want to remind everyone on Zoom to remain muted until the Q&A portion. And we are also recording this event for our YouTube channel, where you can find recordings of our events since May 2020. I do have to say that that is one nice byproduct of all of these Zooms, is that we have so many events that live forever and that people can go and watch when they just now hear about a book. So it's kind of a nice after effect of everything. But we do want to take this opportunity to acknowledge that our bookstore resides on the ancestral unceded land of the Confederate tribes of Warm Springs. In our immediate area are also the unceded lands of the Confederate tribes of Siletz Indians and the tribes of Grand Ronde. We encourage everyone to learn more about the land you occupy and the story of its peoples. And I always like to mention that your independent bookstore, wherever you live, is going to have the best selection and the most people that will know how to get you the right book on that topic. And then just a quick reminder of some upcoming events. Next Tuesday is our second Oregon Battle of the Books virtual event with Jenny England. And if you like spooky poetry, join us on Sunday, October 30th for a special spooky poetry slam. And then celebrate our 6th anniversary on Monday, October 31st with costumes, cookies, and hot cider all day. Be sure to visit roundaboutbookshop.com for more information about our events and book clubs. Tonight, we are so excited to welcome Ashley Winstead to talk about The Last Housewife, a pitch black thriller about a woman determined to destroy a powerful cult and avenge the deaths of the women taken in by it. The Washington Post calls it deliciously unputdownable, and the Seattle Times says, strap in for a terrifying tale of revenge. So Ashley Winstead, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I know you're in the Houston area, so the time difference, you're about 2 hours ahead of us. Yeah. So we do appreciate so much you taking the time out of your evening to join us at our bookstore here in Bend, Oregon.
Oh, thank you so much, Julia. I'm thrilled to be here with you. Yeah, it's such a pleasure. I wish I could be there in person. I will, yes, at some point, hopefully.
Sometime. I mean, if you're not familiar with Bend, it is one of the most beautiful outdoor centered places. We have skiing in the winter, all kinds of water sports in the summer. It's just gorgeous.
Love it.
But we are here to talk about your book, which, as I mentioned when we were getting started, I am this close to the end. So, of course, we will have no spoilers because I also just don't want to spoil it for myself either. One of the first things I wanted to ask you about, though, because this is my genre, I really like the spooky. I do like a lot of the stuff that maybe you would see on Dateline. Like it's scary. Yeah. This is the first time I remember seeing a trigger warning at the beginning of your book. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I have always felt compelled to put trigger warnings. So this is my second thriller, and in my debut, I did the same sort of content warning for people, and I have just really been. It's a product of paying attention to readers' conversations on social media, on Instagram, on Twitter, and just hearing how helpful they are to readers to prepare them for the content that they're going to encounter. And as someone who has experienced being triggered by content that I wasn't expecting, it really kind of hit home all of these conversations. And so I feel really adamant about putting that trigger warning up front in all of my thriller books, and I'll probably start doing it in my romance too, actually, just in case, because I'm not here to I'm not here to re-traumatize any readers, especially in a book like The Last Housewife, which is all about a woman taking control over her past and her trauma. and finally getting to a place where she can do that. That especially, I would hate to have inadvertently, re-traumatize any reader. So I was adamant that was always going to be in the front of the book. And then, of course, since this is such a dark book and darker than my first, I had conversations with my publisher where not only did we put that trigger warning up front, but we did our best to warn people as we were doing the cover reveals, every part of the publicity, to say this is dark. So, take heed.
Yeah, I think of, obviously the, viewer advised before so many of the true crime shows that we watch, because I think there is a sense that we go into them not thinking maybe they will. And I just think, so, as an aside, I recently watched the documentary about the Route 99 concert in Las Vegas, and a friend of mine had actually been there, that shooting.
Yes.
Watching that was the very first time where I was like, I had a physical response where I was like, oh. So what I'm saying is I very much appreciated this warning, and also still going in thinking I'm going to watch for those things, maybe, watch for them if they do have a response in my body, to like listen to it, because your character does that, right? Like she starts to feel these responses that maybe she wasn't prepared for.
Exactly.
So I have to tell you, 6:30. I'm sorry. No, you're fine. My best friend just walked in.
Oh, hi, best friend.
Actually get in and say hi. You can pull up a chair next to you. Sit next to me.
Join us.
Yeah. Yes. She just got off work. But so beyond that, what is your inspiration for this? Was there a ripped from the headline story, or was this more something you just been thinking of?
Yeah, I love the way you phrase that, because it's both at the same time. I found a way with The Last Housewife to marry something that has been percolating in my head for a really long time with a really kind of ripped from the news, ripped from the headlines story. So the thing that has been percolating and sitting with me for a really long time is, as someone who grew up really fast, like I went through puberty pretty early, pretty young, kind of became a woman, well, in air quotes, pretty young. I really, a lot of the scenes and conversations that Shay has with Jamie about her past, and the way that going through puberty and suddenly getting all of this unexpected attention from men, to the point where it felt like a new world of surveillance. That was actually taken from my own experience and many, many conversations I've had with other women, where we've talked about just how deeply growing up and going through puberty and suddenly being subject to older men's eyes and comments, and how much that shaped us, and how we still are carrying that around even as grown women. And I remember I had this conversation once with a good guy friend of mine, and earlier that day I had walked down the street straight past him, and he'd had to say, like, Ashley, it's me, like, what? And he, later that night we were talking, and he's like, why do you do that? Like, you were walking around with your eyes fixed on the ground. And I realized, oh yeah, I've done that since I was 12 years old, because to meet anyone's eyes is an invitation. And I was in my late 20s at the time, early, or maybe early 30s, and this was still something ingrained in me. So I knew that I wanted to write about, like, these forces that are so much bigger than us as women, that shape us and like reach their hands into our brains, and like all these deep places where we're not always totally conscious of them all the time, and really shape us. And then the ripped from the headlines part was I got really into all the cult documentaries that exploded a while back. So if you probably remember like the Vow, the NXIVM cult documentaries, and the Sarah Lawrence sex cult story. And so when I started writing thinking about writing The Last Housewife, Sarah Lawrence story hadn't gotten a ton of coverage. It was like The Cut had done a long investigative piece, but the documentary from Peacock just came out, like just now. So I remember being really struck by both NXIVM and the Sarah Lawrence sex cult story. Like I felt like there was something different about these cults than the kind of cults that I was used to thinking about, where they were really religious and you have a bunch of people like locked in a compound in Waco, that sort of thing. These felt modern, and you had actresses and heiresses and women with like financial and social capital with NXIVM. And with the Sarah Lawrence story, you had all these young college students, with their whole lives ahead of them, and ostensibly at like a very progressive university. And yet they were still handing over their power and like swallowing these sorts of patriarchal ideologies. And I was like, in 2022, like what's going on, right? And so those things kind of married for me in my head. And I realized that there was something about being a woman in the world that kind of conditions you from the minute you enter society to hand over your power and be submissive, and that I wanted to connect those dots. So that was my very long answer for you about what brought those things together.
Well, I know that we were talking, My Favorite Murder did cover the Larry Ray and Sarah Lawrence, and I happened to listen to that episode earlier this year because they were talking about it because it's still happening, or it was still like going through like prosecution and all these things. And then just in the last like 48 hours, it was like this thing on Peacock, and I was like, wait a second. That what I will say is, as I got into your book, it was like I started to just catch the pieces, but it wasn't so much that it like hit me on the head. I was like, well, she must know of this, but is like, expanding it that way. And so the character of Don and, his influence and those things are very, obviously frightening, but also having watched The Vow and listening to these episodes of podcasts, you can kind of see how it happens, right? Like we may think, oh, that would never happen to me, but you just never know, right? You just never know.
No, and that's how I knew I wanted to approach this book, is from a place of empathy, like with the assumption that it could happen to me, and I was going to figure out how it could happen to me and write a book where it happened to, a woman, who looks really familiar and not like the kind of woman we would assume like would, fall prey to the kind of, a cult.
Well, let's talk about your three main characters. Obviously Shay, and we find out more things about her that lead to why she was maybe enticed into this. But you have three very different women. You have Laurel, who right from the bat is very scared and abused and just frightened of the world. And you have Shay is kind of maybe a middle ground, and then Clem is like, I would never, no one's going to tell me what to do. And yet for different reasons, they all join essentially a cult, or the starting of them. So where did you find, how did you shape these women?
I love that question, because I really did want to have women, who are so vastly different and brought together through circumstance, as part of this kind of, showing readers, oh, look, there's so many different ways that it can happen to you. And it was really through doing a lot of research into how cult leaders will hook at, potentials and slowly reel them in and establish intimacy and trust and safety. And I became so fascinated by that psychological process that I wanted to see kind of how it could work with vastly different women. So like you said, for Laurel, Dawn, our cult leader, really makes headway with her by offering her safety and the missing father figure that she's longing for, and all of these things, and this authoritarian figure where he kind of like flips and is like a chameleon, which is something that a lot of psychological studies of cult leaders, take pains to point out, that one impressive thing about cult leaders, impressive but evil, is just how chameleon-like they can be, and constantly adapting once they pinpoint the needs of whoever they're trying to form a relationship with. And so on a complete flip with Clementine, the really strong-willed one, Dawn is able to really point to her strong-willed, rebellious nature and say, that's what's alienating you. If you feel sad and lonely, which frankly we all do, especially when you're, a college student, young in your early 20s, if you feel sad and lonely, and like life isn't perfect, that's why. It's because of these qualities of yours, and I can teach you how to be different. And Shay, to me, was the hardest of all, because Shay is interested in Dawn and enticed into spending more time with Dawn because she feels like she's hooking Dawn in, not the other way around. And like her entire history of understanding her beauty and understanding her worth to men has prepared her to believe that she can hook Dawn in and have this power over her. And it's like only too late that she realizes she's been played this entire time. So that was just really interesting to me, and I guess my perverse interest of like wanting to show all the different ways it could happen.
Yeah. Well, and it is interesting. You use a fictionalized University Whitney, but obviously there's the comparisons to Sarah Lawrence and that kind of, they are open to all these new ideas, and they're going to be these well-rounded women and people in general, and they're going to learn all this stuff and be empowered. And he's like, yeah, they're still lying to you. That kind of like, he really does flip feminism to be like, no, actually it's making you, like you're saying, it's making you sad, you're unfulfilled, you're and I think of The Vow and Nexium and Keith Raniere, having listened to those podcasts and watched the documentary. His take on it is so similar to multi-level marketing, and both Kathleen and I have been in multi-level marketing. We've been with good companies that you sell the product and you can't really make money on them, but you didn't feel bad about yourself. And then I was with one that unfortunately went the other way and was so much more like a cult than I could even fathom. And once I left it, it was just like, it was mind-boggling, the comparisons, if you really break down, but especially the way Keith Raniere is doing it with Nexium, in that he is really trying to sell a product that's going to solve all your problems. You're going to, it's so Scientology, you're going to, raise your consciousness. So, that can be, it's so interesting how many people.
So fascinated by this. I want to like write this book now. Your bad
I
MLM
have to
experience.
Say, for all that people, talk badly about multi-level marketing and direct sales, right? Like there are some that are fine, that are just, a good product and a good network and a good, you know, you meet good people and you'll be friends with them forever because we met through a direct sales company. But you will find the ones, and it's so frightening when you realize that you have drunk the Kool-Aid a little, and and not in this same way, right? Like, it's so hard, you can't compare really being physically, sexually abused. But I will say that there are some companies out there that definitely emotionally abuse their consultants, and they prey on people in a way that should be illegal.
Oh, that's so fascinating. And like, to kind of take that point and not to go too dark, so stop me if I do, but I think one of the things that has really struck me and a lot of the women that I'm friends with post Me Too, like total credit to Me Too, and like a lot of the conversations that have been started these last couple of years about men taking advantages of women and you know, skewered power dynamics, and not just your like Harvey Weinsteins, you know, like not just your like really, really clear abuses, but also your shades of gray. And there's been a lot of conversations about, you know, I didn't want to do that. Why did I do that? Why did I feel like I needed to do that? And that to me has been a really powerful thing that I've thought about. And I know a lot of women I'm friendly with have thought about. And I think I was trying to get at something about like that self-interrogation you were just talking about, like, oh my gosh, I think I drank some of this Kool-Aid. You know, it's the same sort of thing. Like, it's a lot of reflecting lately that made it into The Last Housewife about the Kool-Aid I've drunk. You know, I mean, like, here I am in makeup and you know, I have like all these things that I've learned, all this Kool-Aid that I've drunk about you know, what people are expecting from me, and what the you know, like what's pleasing and what brings, and it literally brings me joy to like put makeup on, but why? And once you start doing all that kind of self-interrogation and like, how did I end up in that room with that guy? How did all of these things happen? You know, it starts to become a really close parallel to kind of cult thinking, cult ideology, except writ large. And so there was something about the like really specific cult of the Patriarchal Society that I wanted to use as kind of a mirror to this larger, you know, cultification, I guess, that we're all in. And I saw you switched windows. Did I freeze up? Oh, I can't hear you. I think you're on mute.
There we go.
There we go.
Something is happening with my laptop with Zoom recently, so I'm on my phone now, but it didn't actually stop the session. I'm so sorry for that.
Oh no, no.
So when you say that, I wonder if there is something out there, maybe we've never heard about it, or just about women, though. It's so, we don't call it a cult, but I almost think of like the Mean Girls or the cult of personality, where, you know, there will be someone exerting force on us that maybe, again, you're saying later, we said, I don't know why I wanted to do that. Or I think back to high school with friends who are like, let's do this mean thing. And years later, I'm like, why did I let them talk me into bullying that girl or that person? So yes, I think what we all don't realize as humans is that it's easier to fall prey to someone than we realize.
Oh yeah, it's part of human nature, which is the scary thing.
And she admits later that she kind of, you know, she does that with her current husband. You know, she agrees to be this housewife, and be in his world, even though she's
Mhm.
very unsatisfied. You know, she's very bored. She leaves her job and thinks, I'll write a book.
Yeah.
And then, you know,
No
things
projecting
pick
from
up.
me at all in that.
I won't ask. So let's switch just a little bit and talk about maybe podcasts, because
Oh yeah.
when I was explaining this book to a couple people, I only work in the store a couple of days and I do a lot of my stuff offsite. But when people were asking me about it, I was like, I said, it's like the worlds colliding. You've got a cult and you've got this, and then there's a podcast. Like, what is it about this rise of podcasts maybe that not only enticed Shay, because then she's listening to this one from a friend, she knows who Jamie is,
Yeah.
and then suddenly hears her own story. Like,
Yeah.
what is it about podcasts to you that lent itself so well to that?
Yeah. So I think podcasts, especially within the true crime sphere, are like revolutionary, honestly. And we've talked already a lot about like the democratization of storytelling that podcasts, or we've talked a lot as a society about how this has allowed, it's giving people microphones, allowing people to tell stories that wouldn't get told. And I think like nowhere to me is that more powerful than within the true crime sphere, when true crime podcasts have shown, like they shine lights on stories that have fallen through the cracks, cold cases, and I think that there is just it's such a gift to just bestow attention on stories and people who have been forgotten. And to me, there's something so powerful and intimate about the podcast listening experience, where you've stripped out everything really except the human voice talking to you, and that to me is really, really powerful. And Shay actually says to Jamie, something that I think about, especially true crime podcasts, is she says, you make it make sense. So you take stories, and through your story, take these true cases, and through your storytelling and through your research and connecting the dots, you make people come to life. You make their decisions legible and understandable. And Shay can't do that with herself. Like, she doesn't have that sense of vision about her own past. She doesn't know why she's done the things she's done, and is therefore really scared about what she's going to do in the future. And so she looks to Jamie to do that same thing for her that he's done for so many other, principally women, but so many other cases, which is make it make sense. Like, help me understand myself and really understand, the person I think I'm going to be going up against in the future. So I knew that I wanted to include these podcast transcripts for that reason. And also because I was setting this challenge for myself in writing this book, that I wanted to make the structure unlike any of my previous books. So you have the podcast transcripts interspersed with the, forward action of Shay doing this investigation, mixed with the kind of short pieces addressing Scheherazade from like an unnamed narrator that you don't know who's really saying it until the end, hopefully, when it comes together. And it was a challenge from a craft perspective as a writer, because all I had was dialogue to paint this picture of this past that Shay's had. Not only dialogue, but like, two friends talking to each other. And that's a really particular kind of language. There's intimacy there, there's shorthands that they have, that's really conversational language. I couldn't do any of like the writerly flourishes I was used to doing, like painting a scene, like the windows were cathedral tall. Like no one talks like that, so I really kind of tied my hands behind my back with that, but I was really determined. I thought that it would lend a sense of intimacy. And lastly, you encounter a lot of dark stuff in this book, and a lot of dark moments, a lot of violence, and you're doing that through Shay describing her past in the podcast transcripts as well. And I figured that there was something a little bit softening about Shay telling the story to Jamie. So I figured that would be a good balance to some of the more straightforward violence that you encounter elsewhere in the book.
Yeah. I've noticed more podcasts again recently. There's one, and I'm going to forget the name of it. If I remember it, I'll put it in the YouTube notes. Yeah. But this person lets whoever they're interviewing do more of what you let Shay do, where it's less of an interview and more just, here's the microphone, please tell me your story. And the first episode I listened to happened to be about someone explaining how her and her family got into Scientology and how she finally got out. I mean, she signed their billion-year contract at 13, which your brain is not ready to be signing things like that. And I was kind of waiting for the interspersed, maybe like historical points of it, where the podcaster would say, okay, here's the background of Scientology. But really it was just, here's this person saying exactly what happened to them. And that was really interesting because so many of the podcasts that we listen to that got us into it, like My Favorite Murder, are two people talking, right? So then you do get that maybe shorthand, or you feel like you're in a group with them, where this one was very much like I really almost even turned my brain off more to listen to this person talking. And I noticed that Jamie lets Shay have these really long stretches of exposition where she's like, and I think maybe he realizes too that like, if I interrupt her, she's maybe going to shut down because this is really heavy stuff. And so from a readerly point of view, it was new because I was waiting maybe for Jamie to interject, for it to be more dialogue. But it really is Shay just being like, man, I got to get this off my chest, And so I read an advanced reader copy of it. So of course, it was not the final layout. And so I was trying to really make sure like who was talking. And then I was like, it really is Shay, just almost like in a therapy session, just getting it out there. So
you're describing exactly what I was trying to do with this.
So what's your take though on say like My Favorite Murder or some of these podcasts that people have, and obviously I like them. I like the humor. I like some of the, not taking it so seriously, but there was a little bit of a backlash of, why are you laughing while you're talking about this horrific thing that happened to people, or, that kind of thing. Jamie's podcast is that very serial style that is very serious. I mean, he is very serious, and he's in one sense really trying to sometimes solve the crime. Not just present it as, I hate to say it, like true crime porn, that kind of like enjoyment at someone else's.
That entertainment.
So where do you kind of fall in that? Like, are you more inclined to listen to the serial style or some of the humor, or do you do a good blend?
So it's so interesting that you ask me that, because personally I like the more serious, I like the more serious in tone. And I will say, I've listened to a fair bit of My Favorite Murder, and it really, really rubbed me the wrong way at first. Like,
I can
it,
get that.
I mean, it absolutely did. And but at the same time, I kept listening, you know? So there was something about it that was very compelling to me. And I think that that's true for a lot of people. And also, you know, kind of the argument goes, and it's funny because I mentored a writer actually, whose book will hopefully be on shelves soon. And her entire book is about that version of the industry, of the true crime industry, like the making light, the skewering, the like, you know, Jeffrey Dahmer is so hot, like, you know, putting flower crowns on and silk printing t-shirts of pictures of serial killers. And she is like she will argue, this author who I respect immensely, that it is stripping power from these men and from these crimes to make light of it. And that there's something really powerful, especially as women, of you know, making a joke out of something that like is an existential threat to you. And I find that argument really compelling. And there is a moment in The Last Housewife where Shay starts laughing about what's going, and you know, and Shay and another character, you know, they're saying all these things they expect are going to happen to them for as punishment, and they're gruesome things, and they just start laughing. And it's this moment where they feel in control. They're not at all, but it's like this escape for a moment where they get to experience this illusion of control together. So that's kind of my take on that form, besides just being like amazing, entertaining, and genuinely funny hosts. And I think that there's something cathartic about that approach to true crime. I just happen to be a very earnest person, like those serious versions.
And I think, pardon me. So for me, the one that I still can't get into, my best friend in Portland, I was just up at her house. She loves Last Podcast on the Left, and they do some incredible stories. It's 3 guys, and they have covered they've done Australian serial killers, Australian, you know, women. Like, they do these series and they're really well researched, but their voice and volume and the profanity, which is it's not what bothers me, it's the amount of it, I guess, with them. She loves them. I cannot listen to them. She's like, but they cover things you would just love. And I'm like, they make me feel like nails on a chalkboard. It's not them, it's me. But I do also love,
too far.
I do also love the really well, and obviously Serial right now, and even for My Favorite Murder, you know, they've donated to what's the End the Backlog, and Serial has basically helped. Adnan Syed is out, you know what I mean? Like, I
know
how, you know, it's so interesting to see podcasts have that effect of maybe what people had been trying to do before, you know, this became everybody could have a podcast, you know what I mean? Like that kind of like, oh, you can't do it unless you're a professional or whatever, or, you know, trained. And it's like, no, if you have something to say, you can say it. Maybe not everyone's going to listen to you, but it's
but you're free to say it.
Free to say it. I think it's a really, like, I'm sure at one point we'll all be done with podcasts, you know, it'll happen again, but I do find the true crime genre of them to just be, and also, I mean, just anything that's educational, historical, you know, that kind of thing is really an interesting thing to listen to. It's kind of like audiobooks, you know, I like people telling a story.
Exactly. There's so much power in that. There's like, and actually Serial and the Adnan case is part of what inspired, I'm not going to spoil anything for you, but it's part of what inspired what I do in The Last Housewife. Just like the tremendous cultural and like not only cultural impact, but like impact on his life in that case that this podcast
Well, and it's so interesting, when Shay first shows up back in New York, in the Hudson Valley at the police station, and the very first thing they say is, "Are you one of those podcast people? We're not going to help you." And it's so interesting because what maybe those police, or I'm sure they're the police that are out there, are like, we don't need the armchair experts. We don't need and it's like, right. But have you been watching things like Reddit that are literally people are helping solve crimes because they have the time and that you don't, or that you're not giving, you know what I mean? It's that kind of like, for all the, issues that like Law and Order and that, genre have come up with, the great impact that shows like Law and Order SVU have actually had on the cultural zeitgeist of like treating sex crimes as crimes and not just like, that's just it. We see that from the very beginning of your book, in that Laurel is just completely ignored, basically. She like, you can see her that she's been assaulted and they're just like, well, sorry, like you went to the party,
and it's going to be an uphill battle to try to ruin this boy's life if that's what you're trying to do.
And for it to come kind of full circle, because if you think about it, if at the time, in this story, if Shay and Clem and Laurel had gone public, how more people are now, because there's this bigger conversation. What was it? The woman at NYU where she carried around the mattress because her university would not take her seriously, that she'd been assaulted on campus. So she literally took the mattress from her dorm and carried it around and was like, until you investigate my assault, I'm going to show the world that you're not doing anything about it.
Oh my God. I love that so much. That requires so much bravery and like willingness for people to know you as this thing, principally, like this horrible assault that's happened to you. And oh God, that's so brave. But
I think maybe now we have more, like you're saying, a podcast, like you can get what you need to out in the world in a way that's like, okay, well, if somebody else hears about it and then, they know that this also happened to someone else, it's that kind of like building community without having to, it's a really interesting dynamic in that. I just loved it though, too, because like I was telling people who were asking me, I'm like, there's a podcast within the book. Like, I was like, it's so meta. Like, you have to read
layered, and it gets, I think, even more meta, maybe by the end. And so I'll be curious to hear what you think. But I'm stuck on your point about like the Reddit and people helping to solve crimes. Just the like huge. There's so many amateur sleuths now. It feels like it's a really interesting moment where we've seen this like boom in amateur sleuthing. And I think the rise of like podcasts in crime fiction and amateur sleuths in crime fiction that you're seeing lately is like just a slightly delayed reaction to that. I'm also curious just how it's going to change crime fiction.
Because so it makes me think of, I don't know if you've seen it on Hulu, the Only Murders in the Building.
I have only season 1 I watched.
It's
what a wonderful cozy. I'm so here for cozy mysteries, like getting their day in the sun.
But it's so now, like it is exactly that. Like we saw something, we don't agree with what the police are saying. I love that show.
Me too. You're right. It is super like of the moment zeitgeisty, like this.
It's
absolutely
so intense. But it does make me think of like the old books I read as a kid, like Harriet the Spy, where, you're just kind of watching your neighborhood more too. Just being that more like aware of what's going on around you in general and that kind of a thing. And the amateur sleuthing, I don't have the time for it, but I am so also intrigued. The fact that it was somebody with a GoPro that helped find Gabby Petito. you
Oh,
know, like
I don't know
they,
that, or I know that story, but or
so
like I didn't know how that came to be found.
these people were, they were watching all of the social media and basically like the people tracking through TikTok and Instagram and whatever, like here was the last post that said she was here. Here was the post that said she was here. Turns out this couple who live in their van with their 2 kids happened to be traveling in the same area as like the last place she was seen. They have a GoPro mounted to their car, that so they just take video as they're going. They hadn't gone through the footage yet, but they'd seen something online and they were like, wait a second, we were there at almost that exact same time.
Oh my
And
God.
they literally had video of the van with like the door open. They found the thing, and they, when people went to search that area, that's where they found her remains.
Oh my goodness. Wow. I did not know that that's how that had come
So
about.
literally, like between Instagram and TikTok, it blowing up so much, and this is an entirely different conversation about the, you know, missing white woman syndrome as opposed to missing Indigenous and BIPOC
Yeah.
women, but by it blowing up in that way of people being so involved and entrenched in it and thinking, well, if someone saw her, you know, who saw her? You people out there, you had to have seen her. And then that's literally how they found her remains.
It makes me want to write a crowdsource thriller, like crowdsource mystery solving thriller. Huh.
I mean, it's just so, it's so interesting to think that things like social media and, you know, by extension, you know, podcasts, because like you're saying, we're listening to one person, like we're having an intimate moment with them, but we don't know them. They don't know us. I mean, when they get something wrong and I'm yelling in my car, that's not how you say the name of that town. They don't know me. But in a sense, for all that it separates us, it actually really does bring us together. There's another story, and I want to say it's on Netflix, but either way, there's a little documentary about a multiplayer role-playing game, one of those ones where, you know, everybody's an avatar and they're from all over the world and playing together. They literally, one of their friends is making all these claims that he's going to kill his family, and they figure out where he lives and they send the police, and sure enough, he had, but they catch him because the people online literally solve it in real time.
Oh my God.
So weird, but so interesting. Like they figured out where his server was, and they figured out like the IP address, and they did like all these things, and it was Toronto, Canada, and they literally called the Toronto police.
And good on them for being able to distinguish like facetiousness from like serious intent, because I've listened to people play games and there's a lot of rough talk. So
well, it was something where he had been saying for multiple weeks, like, I hate my family, I should just kill them and do, you know, like he had been saying these in just chats, and they were like, sure, you're just full of it. But he made a comment to somebody and they were like, I don't think he's joking.
Yeah.
And they went with it. And I mean, how do the Toronto police believe them enough to go like do a welfare check?
Yep. Wow.
Which is also something we need our police here to believe more of when people are talking about those things. So I know our viewers on Zoom right now are your friends and family, but if they have any questions, I welcome them because I've asked quite a few. And we have about 10 minutes left. I know you didn't get a chance to read the book yet, did you?
I have not, but it's on my shelf. It's on my reading list.
Good. Did you have any questions for Ashley?
I don't.
Okay.
I'm really excited for this book though.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah, I love multi-layered storytelling. It's one of my favorites. So I'm really excited to sink my teeth into it.
Yeah, it's a fast read too. Like I am reading it on my app, but I was just like zoom, like I was just zooming through it.
I'd love to hear that.
Yes, it was. And like I said, when I had to stop the other night because I literally had to go to sleep, I was like, it says I only have 8% to go. I gotta finish this. So Yes. So yes, if we have any questions, let's see. Because I think they can unmute themselves if we want to do that. If not, my last question, which we talked about before, was besides your book, can you give us 3 book recommendations?
Oh yeah. So this, I feel like, is like what I was put on earth to do, because I just love other people's books so much. Yes. Okay. So I have book recs for books that you can find on shelves now. And even though I have a ton that are coming out in 2023 too, but You're Invited by Amanda Jayatissa, for fans of dark and twisty thrillers. So if you like The Last Housewife, highly recommend this book. It is described as Lucy Foley's Guest List meets Crazy Rich Asians. And that is such an accurate description. It is about a woman who goes to her ex-boyfriend is marrying her ex-best friend on this like lavish island wedding, and she goes to stop the wedding. And then shortly after she arrives, the bride goes missing and all fingers point to her. And that's literally just the premise. That's like what's on the back cover copy. I spoiled nothing. That's just like the setup. It's so twisty and so good. So I love that. Absolutely adore, came out earlier this summer, My Summer Darlings by May Cobb. So May Cobb is this, I'm here, in Texas. She's this phenomenal Texas mystery and thriller writer who I will say is like single-handedly doing lifting Texas crime fiction. And My Summer Darlings is kind of a modern, her take on the witches of Eastwick, kind of like a sexy, dark, dangerous stranger comes to town. And all of these, the women of this town in East Texas all fall for him, but in different ways. And he's got some serious secrets up his sleeve, as do all the women. So it's super enticing and has like this excellent soapy quality to it. So that's a pool read, or by the fire read, I guess we're going to fall. And last, I love Bad Habits by Amy Gentry. To me, it is the premier dark academic book. And I know everyone's really into dark academia, but Amy Gentry came out February 2021 and is about a professor, a kick-ass female professor whose past comes back to haunt her at a conference. And it turns out she has done possibly some wicked things to get where she is. And it's just one of the most brilliant books I've ever read. So those are my 3. I could probably keep going because I'm reading some amazing 2023 books, but
yeah, I do love reading the books that are set to come out. It's hard sometimes to wait because I want to tell people about them.
I know.
But yeah, I'm looking forward to just so many books coming out this fall or this winter and into spring. Now, The Last Housewife just came out. Yeah. We always, do this to authors, but I'm still going to do it anyway. Are you working on anything right now?
Oh, yes. So I am working on so much. I have 2 books coming out next year. Again, just like this past year. One romance coming out in the spring called The Boyfriend Candidate, and I'm so excited about that one. It's a fake dating in the political world book, and my next thriller is going to be out in fall 2023, and it's called Midnight is the Darkest Hour, and it is set in my neighboring state of Louisiana. And it opens with a skull being pulled out of the swamp in Louisiana in this small Louisiana town, Southern Baptist country. There's never been a homicide here. No one knows who this skull belongs to or how it got there, except for the preacher's daughter, who knows exactly who it belongs to. So that's my little tidbit there. Yeah.
I will definitely keep an eye out for that one. My best friend in Portland is from Georgia, so she loves that kind of dark Gothic, the set in the South thing. So yeah, I'll definitely have to get her a copy of that. Well, Ashley, thank you so much for being here with us tonight and for working with me through some technical issues. I absolutely adored this book. And again, I'm just so appreciative that you took the time. Our bookstore is, getting on the map, but we're still small here in Bend, Oregon. So it's just great to have authors that love indie bookstores the way it sounds like you do. And maybe you should be working at a bookstore too, to be giving recommendations to people for what to read.
Yes, a dream. Yeah.
Right. Or start your own. That's it. If you ever start a bookstore, you let me know.
Okay, well, and I will come visit in Bend because we are planning an Oregon trip. And yeah, this is such a joy. Thank you for being here with me and your wonderful questions. Such a
Thank
pleasure.
you. Yes, if you make it this way, please do let us know. We'll have you in the store. We'll do a little signing or something.
Love
But
it.
either way, Bend is a wonderful place to visit, and I hope you do make it to this coast. So I will sign off on this by just reminding people that your independent bookstores need you more than ever, especially after everything with the pandemic. So please shop indie as much as you possibly can. If it's not from Roundabout, order Ashley's book from your local bookstore and support those indies. Keep reading, keep attending author events, and books are life.
Yes, amen.
Amen.
Perfectly said.
Well, excellent. Have a good rest of your evening, and I hope to talk with you soon and read your next book very soon.
Thank you so much, Julie. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye. Let's do